Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the webinar. Please wait for a minute until all attendees connect. Thank you. John?
Welcome to the webinar. I wanted to spend 2 minutes to cover BNamericas and how we cover not only electric power, but all aspects around the projects and information gathered within our team. BNamericas has actually been around for well over 25 years now, and we're currently in multiple countries, including the major ones in Latin America: Mexico, Colombia, Chile, Argentina, and Brazil. I myself am based out of Sao Paulo, Brazil. Some of the major things we've been focused on for 2022 is Brazil. And that's why not only have we been focused on the data within Brazil, but even added Portuguese to the platform. So now it's in all 3 major languages: English, Spanish, and Portuguese. In terms of our services, some of the things that we're known for is webinars like this one. But of course, we are known for many other aspects of the industry, especially around news and projects. In terms of news, it's not about just news. It really is about why it matters and its downstream effects in every individual sector and in every individual country. For instance, we cover very heavily around the political landscape in every single country, or even something in terms of investing and financing topics. Also, we actually teamed up with Dow Jones to provide you with their content as well. And in terms of projects, we get down to the nitty-gritty of a particular project. So not only can you search by stage or CapEx, for example, but you can actually get really creative. So for instance, if you wanted to look in the operational stage to look for capacities, or the really early stages of a project to find out who's financing and or doing the initial stages of a project. And then once you are able to do that, you're very easily able to map out the important factors, such as, who are the particular players in a particular project, as well as their key contacts. And then once you find out, for instance, in the construction stage, who's the main works contractor, you're able to find all the other related projects that they're involved in as well. In terms of sectors, we cover all the major industrial sectors across Latin America. For the purposes of this webinar, it'll be focused solely around electric power. But we also cover very heavily around the political risk and macroeconomy for every single sector in every single country, and a lot of times in every single state within those countries. And in terms of Latin, we define that as anything Mexico South, including the Caribbean. And lastly, in terms of our clients, we already work with some of the major players out there when it comes to Caterpillar on the supplier side, or maybe on the contractor side with Halliburton. We also work with a lot of financing companies such as JP Morgan and Santander. Lastly, just want to thank you again for attending the webinar. If you will have my email available to you if you have any questions, and I'll be more than happy to discuss offline. Please enjoy the webinar, and as we say in Brazil, fique à vontade.
Thank you very much, John. Good morning. Welcome to this webinar, in which we will be analyzing the fast pace of the energy transition in Latin America's biggest economy. My name is Cesar Iliano, and I am the content director for BNamericas. I want to thank you all for participating in this event. In the next minutes, I will be presenting a brief introduction on the renewable sector in Brazil, with some insights and forecasts from the industry and from our own project database. After that, BNamericas energy correspondent in Brazil, João Montenegro, will be moderating a panel with executives from 3 key companies in this sector: Roberta Monomi, head of Brazil for Enel Green Power; Clarissa Sadok, president of AES Brazil; and Luis Pita, general manager for Brazil at Atlas Renewable Energy. So let's get started. Brazil ended 2021 with over 21 gigawatts of installed wind power, adding more than 3 gigawatts last year. For this year, considering the contracted projects in the regulated and free power markets, Brazil will add more than 5 gigawatts of wind power capacity. BNamericas database shows 237 active wind projects under construction or awaiting construction decision in Brazil, with a combined capex of $7.1 billion. When we look at the solar power capacity in Brazil, we see the country surpass 14 gigawatts. As a result, solar has now exceeded the 14 gigawatts installed capacity of the country's largest power plant, Itaipu Nacional. The industry forecasts rapid growth in solar plants in operation this year, with another 11.9 gigas expected to come online. On the other side, BNamericas database shows there are 162 active solar projects under construction or awaiting construction decision, with a combined capex of $5.7 billion. Finally, we took a snapshot of our database to understand the solar and wind capacity that entered construction phases in the last 6 months in Latin America. And what we saw is that Brazil leads the pack in solar with 2.7 gigas in August last year. And in wind power, it's behind Chile with 732 megawatts. In our BNamericas platform, you can access the detailed information of all these projects and take a look at the involved companies and their contacts. Well, as I announced before, now we will have a discussion panel with Roberta Bonomi, Head of Brazil for Enel Green Power, Clarissa Sadok, President of AES Brazil, and Luis Pita, General Manager for Brazil at Atlas Renewable Energy. I will leave you now with Joao Montenegro, BNamericas Energy Correspondent for Brazil, who will be moderating the dialogue. Joao?
Thank you, Cesar. Good morning. First of all, I'd like to thank again the participants. I'm really glad to have the opportunity to be speaking with top executives representing key players in Brazil's electric power sector. Clarissa, Luis, and Roberta, thank you. So without further ado, Roberta, let's start with you. This first question is about the oil price surge that we have been experiencing globally, mostly given not only because of the recovery of global economies after the pandemic, but also due to the geopolitical instability, mostly related to the war in Ukraine. Does this increase in oil prices mean there will be an acceleration of energy transition, in your opinion?
Yeah, in my opinion, I think that this reinforces one of the main arguments for renewables, which maybe in the past hasn't been highlighted that much. In the past, renewables were good for the environment, let's put it this way, in some countries because they were cheaper, like in Brazil. But there is one very strategic issue that is very relevant, especially in countries that have a highly dependence on oil and thermal in general generation, like the case of many European countries, which is diversify the sources. So what has been clear, what is very clear now is that it is important to accelerate this transition by removing all the roadblocks. For example, the permitting process in some countries are complicated, and many countries are working to facilitate those, to accelerate that. And the other thing that we will see that will have an impact on the energy transition is that there will be another push toward electrification, because by electrifying you will depend less on oil and gas, and you can provide electricity with renewable energy. So the combination of it's important to diversify and it's important to depend less on gas and therefore to electrify, I think that they're going to give a big push to overcome the problems that in some countries there still are in having an accelerated path with the renewable energies.
Clarissa, Brazil is highly dependent on imports of diesel, for example. We're a huge country, very big area in terms of territory, and we're facing like a hike in fuel prices. And do you think that this current situation could contribute to expand even more renewable sources in Brazil, even though we know there's the problem of intermittency of wind and solar solar power?
Thank you, João. I totally agree that, you know, this increase in the cost of the thermal generation, the overall thermal generation, is another aspect to push toward the renewable tendency. But I would say that, you know, this renewable tendency is really strong, and the companies are really committed with their ESG agenda. And what we are seeing, in fact, is that because of the increase of the oil price, it's also increasing the cost of the solar and wind for the new projects, because, you know, we need to transport the wind turbines, we need to transport the solar panels from, you know, most of the time from China. So what we are seeing is an increase of the cost of energy in the future for all sources of energy, especially because, you know, we are seeing an increasing competition. A lot of countries want to reduce their dependency from, you know, thermal generation, dependency from other countries, especially in the case of Europe. So, you know, I agree with you. It's helping the solar and wind market, but it's also, you know, increasing the cost of all sources of energy as of today for new projects, I mean. And, you know, in Brazil, we have this discussion that we could take the day talking about if we need more or not more thermal plants in the country because of the intermittency of wind and solar. But, you know, there's other ways of doing it, right? Especially here that we have the huge hydros and there are batteries. So, you know, but that's a discussion that we will need to face in the near future.
Luis, still sticking to this subject, Brazil has recently regulated the rules for hybrid parks, combining, for example, solar and wind plants. This is a way that we could optimize these energy generation projects, for instance, because we know that in general, wind plants are produce more during the night, less during the day. So this combination could optimize using the same sharing like substations and transmission lines. How do you see this kind of projects improving and expanding in Brazil? I think you're on mute, Luis. Still can't hear you. Clarissa and Roberta, can you hear Luis, or is it only me?
No, yeah, that's no. Any,
Agora.
Now you're there. Okay.
Obrigado. So thank you very much for the invitation, and it's a pleasure to be here. Also, it's the first panel in which 50% of women and the 50% are men, including the moderator. So I think it's a great achievement and success for the organization. Coming back to your question, I think it's the perfect match. So we are in a country with enormous natural resources, lots of wind, lots of solar. Most of them are in the same area. So resources in most of the areas in which today we have a high wind, we have high solar. It's not the opposite. In the southeast, for example, there's not that much wind, and there is a good solar resource, especially in the north of Minas. So I think it's a great match. As I said, it also will contribute to a smaller capex, which is a point that can be directed to the final customers, and also it will help to inject into the grid a more stable energy. So combining the daily resources of solar plus, as you perfectly said, wind at night, it will be more than have separate sources injecting in the grid. So I think Brazil has done a tremendous step forward approving this regulation.
And meanwhile, Brazil is already planning an expansion of its transmission system in order to allow more energy coming mostly from the northeast, where renewables are expanding the most, to the southeast. So in this, by doing so, it intends to reduce the hydrological risk as the main hydropower plants are in the southeast. So the northeast tends to play a growing, more and more important role in Brazil's electric power matrix. I don't know, maybe Roberta, if you want to comment on this.
Yeah, I mean, I think that not only it's an issue of diversifying the hydrological risk, is that the planning of the Brazilian system is done also on a lowest cost hypothesis, and therefore what they have found out in their analysis is that it's cheaper for the whole system to build renewable plants in the northeast, where you have a very good resource, and add the cost of transmission than doing other solutions that could provide the energy to the system. So not only diversifies the risk, but it's a very good move also to, in the end, reduce the cost of energy for the system, which should result at some point in a benefit for the final customer, who suffers in Brazil for a very high energy cost in terms of purchase parity index.
Okay, so moving on to the next question, maybe for Clarissa now. As a capital-intensive sector, does the environment of high interest rates and commodities, equipment prices that we have in Brazil and abroad, does it make it difficult for companies to finance their operations in any way? What are the strategies of the companies to avoid that, since apparently CapEx of the projects are going up, as you were mentioning before, Clarissa?
Yes, well, as I mentioned before, everything is increasing costs, right? The commodity prices are higher, the transportation costs are higher, and as you mentioned, the finance cost is also higher. So in the end of the day, for the same, let's say 100 megawatt, we need much more money to build the same plant. So what it makes more difficult, especially for small players, to compete in the market, because they will need more equity and they will need a credit for a higher volume of that. So it's in the end of the day, it takes out smaller competitors from the table, and it makes the client in the end of the day also pays for higher costs. But what we are seeing is that especially in Brazil, we finance most of the projects in the local market for many reasons. One is BNDES and BNB, they have subsidized sources of capital, and also because tax impacts and all those stuff. So it's what we are seeing is that not only the basic interest rate is higher, but also the spread over that is also higher. So we need to be very careful about it and price it correctly. Otherwise, it could be a disaster in the return and in the project we are building.
Thank you. Luis, has this situation of this global and domestic price hikes affected in any way your businesses in Brazil?
Yeah, they are dramatically affecting, since there is not a lot of visibility on how the commodities are going to evolve. Most of the capex that we have are related to very sensible materials like steel, aluminium. So obviously the cost of polysilicon, shipping, bring some parts from abroad. And also, as Clarissa was saying, the cost of financing is higher. So what we are seeing in the short term in Brazil is a different scheme of pricing and also a different way of contracting the services that we need to perform and the products that we need to build our parks, right? So we need to be creative, because the only real parameter that we do not control is the price of energy. That's a market. We need to be more creative than other companies to build a capex that is competitive and that can present an attractive proposition to our final customers. So it's a very challenging moment. I think in 2020 we lived something that we thought was not going to be worsened, and I think we are living a moment now in which even more variables than those we had a couple of years ago are arising. So yes, I think it's a unique moment, I would say.
Okay, just a quick heads up to your audience. You can at any moment ask questions using the box on the GoToWebinar platform at the right side of the screen, okay? So we'll be happy to receive your questions. And moving on, Roberta, how do you evaluate the free power market opening in Brazil? Is it evolving in a satisfactory pace? And how are you preparing for that, for this new scenario?
Well, I think that the first thing is important to highlight the starting point. The free market in Brazil is already a reality. It's the largest market in Latin America. It's very dynamic. There are already, I think, 170 terawatt hours exchanged. Thousands of clients that can already participate in this market. We have been actually one of the first companies to build our project based on sales in the free market rather than on tenders. And so we definitely evaluate very well what is the free market today in Brazil. Then the opening, it's a further opportunity. We are definitely ready to do that. Of course, we know that the moment you reduce the size of the potential clients, you need to have a more, say, a broader type of organization. But we are definitely ready for that, and we welcome it. I think that it's important to highlight, though, that it has to be done in a good way, in the sense that it needs to take into account the sustainability of the whole energy sector, that we don't need to have a cost allocated, let's say, in a wrong way. So when it's going to be made, it needs to be made very carefully, not to put cost on who does move and things like that. But we are definitely welcoming it and hoping it will happen. It will happen soon.
Clarissa, I think it's probably been done. This happened like 1 or a couple of months ago. ANEEL published, our power watchdog, ANEEL published a series of recommendations in order to enable this reduction of the size of the clients, of the consumers that can participate in the free power market. And it will mostly be addressed by this federal bill that is under analysis in the National Congress, which is known as the Electric Power Sector Modernization Bill. What's your take on this project? Have you taken a look, and how do you see all this congressional and regulatory efforts to enable this acceleration of the opening of the market here in Brazil?
Joe, I see that, you know, as the future, and it's coming. Not sure, as Roberta was mentioning, how fast it's gonna be the migration, but it's coming, and we are all getting prepared to serve these clients. So just to give you an idea, currently we have like 15,000 clients, and it's gonna be 182,000. So it's gonna increase a lot in the near future. Question mark is how fast, and it's a different game, right? So currently we have bilateral transactions with most of our clients, and we do tailor-made products to attend exactly what those clients want, and each one need a completely different product. But you know, one thing is to serve, you know, 500 clients. The other thing is to serve thousands of clients. So we need a more, we need e-commerce. We need a different kind of ways to attend these clients, and that's what we are doing. So we have a platform that we put alive like a year and a half ago, and we are modernizing that platform and creating services there to provide to these clients. So it's a completely different game. Currently, we have these very intensive clients that understand the sector in details and know exactly what they want. And now we are going to serve clients that, you know, doesn't know much about it, that need help on how to manage that energy, on the best way to use that energy depending on the hour of the day. So you know, it's gonna double the volume of energy in the free market, and we need to provide other kind of products, much more service than we currently do.
Luis, what about your projects in Brazil? Are you focusing more and more on the free power market, or are you still more linked to ANEEL's regulated auctions? How are you performing in this sense?
So, because of the size of the company, we need to carefully choose where we go. So, different from my colleagues here, we are an IPP. We are a very relatively small company, and as of today, we started our operation focusing on the regulated market, because at that time was the only market that really counted in Brazil for our business, and then we switch to the free market, targeting on electro-intensive customers. We found an opportunity also to work on the US dollar PPAs, which we found that there was a good market to focus on. And lately, we have had an eye on the regulated market. Prices that arose last year were not ridiculously low. I think there is an opportunity there, and we will have a look at that. But I think what we need to do as a company is to look for the best interest for our shareholders, also for the communities, for the people that take care of our day-to-day business, and carefully look to all the opportunities that arise in the market.
And you've been significantly active in the renewable energy certificates market, right? The I-RECs. How is this developing in Brazil?
I mean, I think we were the first company that would authorize and to raise I-REC market. So I certificates. I think there is a huge market. We are in a country with enormous natural resources, and I think it's a very infant market, and we can find outside a lot of opportunities. So we are devoting some time to explore more and more, and try to bring new source of income for our company.
Okay, thanks. Roberta, we have seen in Brazil a situation of overcontracting of power distributors, which is directly linked, is kind of a consequence of the expansion of the free power market. So more consumers are migrating for the free contracting environment, which leaves ANEEL's power generation auctions like emptier, let's say, let's put it this way. How do you see, what's your expectations regarding this year's auctions? We'll see like new energy and existing energy tenders that are already planned by the government?
We see soon, so I'm not the right person to ask, but I mean, the situation, the overall generation is, the overall situation is that over contracting. Then we will see in the specific years if there is some opening. I agree very much with Luis that it's anyway, the fact that we work a lot with the free market doesn't exclude the regulated market, and especially in this moment with this scenario of increasing capex and so on and so forth, I think it's a place where we can see an important price signal. It depends a lot on the capacity that will be auctioned, but we are. I think it's especially interesting. I mean, it's always interesting to see the prices in the tenders, but this year is going to be especially interesting.
Do you agree?
I'm sorry, on the tenders. Going back to a point that was mentioned before by both Clarissa and partially by Luis, that we're going to also have a capacity auction in December. And for us, what is key is what we are trying to explain to various stakeholders is that for us, it's very important that we have the concept of technological neutrality, and that service of the capacity can be provided not necessarily by thermal generation, but can be provided by any technology that can provide the service, including batteries. Because the experience we're seeing in the world is that when they can compete on the service, batteries can win. We had an experience in Italy 3 weeks ago, where in the capacity market of Italy, they could participate, all the technologies could participate, and 95% was won by batteries. So as Enel, we were awarded 1.6 gigawatt of batteries in a competitive tender. So for us, not only there is the market of the energy as quantity of energy, but there is also an important market to be developed, which is the market of, let's say, services or other things that are not the quantity of energy, which I think it's very important to be developed in Brazil. To get out a bit of this point of do we need the thermal or not, I mean, I think it's important to say what kind of services the grid needs, the system needs, and then whichever can provide that service at the most competitive price would benefit the system in the end.
Okay. Clarissa, Roberto was saying that it is important to allow any kind of energy sources to participate in the capacity auctions. Last year, only thermal plants were available. Why? This is a question we have just received from the audience. Why is the Brazilian government still allowing investments to be made in coal and gas-fired plants? We know that we had a very important serious drought last year, and natural gas plants had a major role in assuring supply. But aren't there any other ways, like more environmentally friendly, that could at least reduce the participation of thermoelectric power in Brazil's matrix?
Yeah, João, absolutely. I think, you know, it's Brazil. It's a unique situation because we different from most of the countries. We have a percentage of renewables that is really material in our matrix. So because of the hydro that we have, we are a hydro country. So even in 30 years from now, we're still going to have at least 40% of hydro in our matrix. So it makes things a little bit different from other places where most of the energy comes from thermal. But as you said, and as Roberto also mentioned, there are other ways to provide this stability in the system other than thermal. But in this case, we need to change regulation. We need to adjust the regulation for instance, to use the hydro reservoirs as a battery also. So, you know, it's a little bit more complicated and demands a lot of studies. Thermal is the safest way in terms of operations, but you know, I think we're evolving there, and we have like a crystal ball here in Brazil because we are seeing other countries evolving before us in some discussions, such as the retail market in the free market. We can see like US that is already totally open, the kinds of services that the companies can provide to their clients. And for sure, we can see on the thermal generation the difference that other countries are treating that discussion and special taxes over that. One aspect that we didn't touch on the thermal generation is the hydrogen discussion. So what we are seeing is the discussion of the green hydrogen evolving a lot. That could be a very important opportunity, not only for the internal market to be greener, but also to export energy. We are very well located in terms of distance to Europe, for instance. So we could, you know, export that kind of green energy to Europe in the future. So, you know, together with the battery and the offshore wind, those are, you know, I would say the future for the end of the decade sources that we should see growing.
Which brings us to the next question that came from our audience. The person is asking if how Brazil's port infrastructure is ready to accommodate hydrogen plants. If I'm not mistaken, Clarissa, AES has signed an MOU with the Pecém port in Ceará, right? And it's a very well-established port. And how do you see, not only in the Northeast, but other parts of the country, are we ready? We have infrastructure enough for accommodating these kind of undertakings?
Yeah, you know, the Pecém port that is in the Ceará state, as you mentioned, we have an MOU with them, and we have an MOU with the state of the Ceará to study the hydrogen, and it's amazing the quality of their work and the business plan that they have and the infrastructure that they are building there. So, you know, it's they have room for us to put our hydrogen factory there. They are increasing the port structure to export if needed. So, you know, it's I went there in December and was amazing to learn how developed they are to receive this kind of investments.
Some of the deals, Luis, that have been signed so far, these MOUs with Pecém and Suape Port, they include the possibility of combining, of having offshore wind plants providing energy for the hydrogen plants. How do you see the offshore wind market developing in Brazil? Some people say that it is a very how can I say, it will expand a lot, but not necessarily in the near term, since we have a lot of potential onshore. How do you see this situation?
I mean, I think the potential, not the potential, the factor capacity of wind in Brazil doesn't happen anywhere in the world. Okay, so also we have a lot of land here. What we said before, combination of wind and solar in specific places, like where there's a lot of resource, like for example in Ceará, where there's this massive noise, positive noise regarding hydrogen. I don't see why in those areas offshore should be an opportunity. I think the cost of offshore compared to the cost of onshore and the capacity factor we have here makes super viable to continue on a hybrid system to provide to these factories 24/7 our energy supply. Different story is in the southeast. So as we were saying before, and all of us know, the highest concentration of load is in the southeast of Brazil, while most of the energy renewable energy is generated in the northeast. So there is wind in the southeast. No, it's very limited. Offshore, yes. There is solar in the southeast. Obviously, there is a lack of interconnection capabilities that will resolve hopefully 2025 onwards. And I think in those areas in which wind cannot compete because of lack of reforce on onshore, yes, there's an opportunity, but I don't see as a general basis like other countries in which they can be more competitive because of the lack of resource inland.
Yeah, even so, we have over, please, Roberta.
I just wanted to add something. I mean, this is a discussion where we know that we agree that we disagree with different players. But for me, if I look at it from a country standpoint, I understand the point of Brazil investing in the technology ramp up of green hydrogen. Why? Because they have this possibility of export, and therefore for Brazil there is a competitive advantage in managing to develop this possibility. On the other hand, if I look, as Luis was saying, in the shorter terms, there are countries that need offshore much more than Brazil, and they should invest, in my opinion, in the technological ramp up, which allows to reduce the cost and make it a more viable technologies also in Brazil in the end. But today, as we were saying, there is plenty of potential for onshore wind, and to me, Brazil is still a country where it's dramatically important to reduce the tariff in the end, and therefore to pursue constantly the lowest cost option.
Well, anyway, we have like over 80 gigawatts of offshore wind projects already being analyzed by our environmental regulator, IBAMA. It's a lot. Of course, one thing is to submit a project. The other thing is to make it happen. But we have the government published a decree setting the basic rules for offshore wind generation in Brazil, and something that is being now analyzed by ANEEL for further more detailed regulations. We have another question from our audience here. Maybe Clarissa, I don't know if you want to answer this one. Which do you think will be the share of distributed energy generation in the future of energy transition in Brazil? It's growing a lot. If I'm not mistaken, distributed generation accounts for the largest part of PV, photovoltaic solar power in Brazil, something that is growing a lot. We had a regulatory frame published at the beginning of the year. How do you see this evolving, and would this impact in any way, or even could be something of interest for your company here in investing in Brazil?
John, that's a good question and a complicated one. So, you know, currently what we see is that this market needs update on the regulation. Currently, when a client migrates for this distributed generation model, what's happening is that the distribution companies are suffering, are losing money because of that. And it doesn't make sense to have a model where, you know, the migration creates, you know, burden in someone. And in fact, the distribution company that is suffering from that is the one that needs to approve, you know, my project if I decided to do a distributed generation. So, you know, the incentive is not helping the source to grow fast. So, in one hand, I think we need change this regulation to see this market evolving faster. In the other hand, depending on the speed of the migration to the free market, that source could also be reduced because it's easier to pay someone to generate for you than you spend the capex to do that, and have to administrate these assets. So if depending on how far we are going with the free market, the possibility of the clients to migrate to the free market, we may end up seeing less volume in these sectors. So for me, it's a question mark. We are not investing on that because it's complicated and we need to invest a lot of time on that. So we prefer invest our time on bigger projects that we are going to make the same kind of return but with a higher volume. But let's see. I think a lot of things is going to change on distribution generation in Brazil.
Thanks. Luis, how do you evaluate the importance of digital and software in the energy transition journey? Could you share maybe some results in terms of efficiency gains that came from increasing software and digital solutions in your company's renewable projects?
I think that's the path to follow. We inaugurated the first digital substation in Latin America, I think was in 2019 in our USAID project, and how they behave compared to traditional substations governance is completely different. It makes a lot of sense to invest in that technology. Regarding the downstream of the digitalization, which comes closer to the end consumer, as Clarissa was saying, you cannot manage the challenges that we have ahead in terms of having thousands of customers in the same way that we did today. So, for example, as of today, we are concentrating in electro-intensive customers, which are relatively few compared to the total number of customers in Brazil. If we adapt or we decide to open the range of services to a wider number of customers, obviously we need to operate and to have a complete different company of the one that we have now. And digitalization should be the backbone of the process. So there is no way to manage that in a different way that using the sophisticated platforms that some of our competitors and commercializadores are using in Brazil.
Okay, Roberta, would you like to make any comments on previous experiences on your company?
Yeah, on top of what has already been said, I think it's important to mention that as a sector, there are other types of innovation also in the whole infrastructure. So when we think of modern services to this huge number of consumers, mobility, electric mobility, housing, security. There are a number of services that can be provided that imply a modernization of the infrastructure. For example, we have experience with the smart meters, for example, that allows a number of services that otherwise are impossible. So I think that there is a lot of digitalization and automatization already happening. Let's say in the infrastructure that we already have, like the digital substation or the data-driven models for predictive maintenance and things like that. But there is a further step up that can be done in the whole infrastructure by upgrading the infrastructure of the electrical system, and that is another big challenge and something that will come up at some point, which will allow a number of services that will have a much efficient use and effective use of electricity in this energy transition.
What about batteries? It seems ANEEL is planning to make some regulatory moves related to energy storage this year. Are you considering those opportunities, looking for competing for large grid scale energy storage solutions? If I'm not mistaken, there is an auction being planned by ANEEL for Roraima, where only energy storage solutions would be eligible to participate. Are you somehow looking at this kind of opportunity?
As I said, we are actually actively trying to extend this kind of opportunities to this concept of technological neutrality, because the technology has reduced the cost significantly in these past years, driven mainly by mobility. But this allows this kind of big storage systems we are seeing everywhere in the world happening, and we really want to do it in Brazil also, because let's remember that this is a way to provide services to the system that is much faster than building other plants. So that's also another reason why we see it as something urgent, and we are absolutely ready for that, and we are talking with various stakeholders to try to make it happen as soon as possible.
Okay, Clarice, I have two questions. Sorry, keep going, Roberta.
No, in a larger scale. I mean, not in a pilot scale. We want to see it on a commercial scale.
Okay, thanks. I had prepared two questions here that I think could be coupled. I'd like to know what's your take on Electrobras privatization, which is supposedly in final stages. It's still relying on a final approval from the Federal Audit Court, TCU. How would it impact, in case it is completed, how would it impact the market? And I think it might be worth asking you also, we are in a presidential election year. And if Electrobras privatization is not completed this year, for example, and depending on the result of the elections, this process could not move forward. So question number one, what is the impact of an eventual possible privatization of this company, which accounts for most of Brazil's energy capacity and transmission? And do you have any fears regarding the results of the presidential elections in terms of regulatory impacts, maybe contracts that had or regulations that had been approved before and that might be changed after if the government if for example the current president is not reelected?
So yeah, answering your first question about the Electrobras privatization. So, I think it would be great if we have Electrobras privatized, and the team there is working to push that agenda, if I understand correctly, in this second quarter of this year. So besides the positive effect of having, the biggest company in the private sector, we also have, the end of the quotas for the energy. So probably they have like 7 gigas of energy that could migrate to the free market, which would also help to increase the liquidity of the free market. Currently, the free market represents 1/3 of the total generation of the country. So if we have more energy there and more clients there, more liquidity, and it's better for the market. We can, have a market with some products that we currently don't have, like hedges and finance products that could help the market. We also have in this privatization a right for growing in thermal plants. It would be an extra 8 gigas in thermal capacity. So that one would happen over the next few years, and it would, in the end of the day, impact the cost of energy of the country, because every time we increase the percentage of thermal, you increase the price in general of the market. So, answer your second question, I would say that if we don't have a privatization in the second quarter, I'm not sure if it's going to be in the next government or not. And if it happens, this specific clause of thermal will depend on the policy of, the green agenda of the next government. So it will depend on the privatization agenda and in the green agenda to see if it's going to happen and if it's going to happen the way it is.
Okay, Luis, what do you think about this subject particularly? And if Brazil's government is changed, do you see how could this impact a renewable energy market specifically? Would this be better or worse?
I mean, we have experience on the years of Lula, of an enormous integration of renewables in the Brazilian metrics. So I think that's a no return journey that has been initiated many years ago. So we're very confident that whoever the next administration would be, there is a lot of space for renewable. So because of the resources again that Brazil has, the integrated network that it has, the low consumption of electricity per person, there is an enormous potential for the next years, and additional uses, as Roberta and Clarissa were saying, electrification, electric car introduction, possibility of generating hydrogen for internal consumer for export. I mean, the path that we have in front of us is enormously attractive. Whoever, independent on whoever wins the election, we see obviously if the new administration is more conservative in terms of state-owned industries, will be difficult to continue the program of privatization. I don't see it will be a great path there. It will be a shame, because I think that will be extremely positive for the market, increased competition. Also, the injection of approximately 25 billion reais of the Conta de Desenvolvimento Energético that this could cost could end on a more competitive rate for the end consumer. So it will be a little step back. But in terms of your specific question, how do we see renewables with any of the administration? I think we have a great and bright future in terms in front of us.
Yeah, and if I can, sorry, if I can ask you. I think that we saw in the past that the regulatory system in general in Brazil is quite robust, has been modern, and has a governance that allows it to have its own life, let's say, regardless of the political changes. If we look at the trends, there is a lot of opening with the process of the consulta pública. So in this sense, we think that as well, that the trend is clearly there, and we can survive any type of change that can happen, because, as I said, it's a trend, and it's, in the end, it's a trend that benefits the country. So in a way or another, it's gonna go on.
Okay, thanks. Well, at this point, we're concluding our session. Maybe if you want to make any final remarks, please be my guest.
Thank you, João. Just want to, thank you guys for inviting us, and it's been great to share this panel with Roberta and Luis and learn from them and see that we are all increasing the renewables in the country, so we all have the same agenda instead of being competitors. But we are doing a good job together here to go to this green agenda. Thank you all.
Luis?
Thank you, Clarissa. I would just add on what Clarissa said, and I know that the companies that here are represented has an enormous concern regarding ESG. So I don't see a renewable agenda without being a sustainable agenda, without having a lot of interference in the wellness of the communities, in the number of stakeholders that can be benefited from our projects, which most of them are in remote and depressed areas. So what the industry has done in Brazil in the last 5 years, let's say, or 4 years, in terms of adapting our companies or adapting the products that and services that we sell, including a high component and I would say expensive, because we need to do sophisticated programs to incorporate to our proposals, and also they're embraced not only by our customers but also by the end customers. And I think it's an effort that the society in Brazil in general has done in this last time, which is has no precedence. And I think all of us in this forum are very happy and very proud to participate in this change.
Roberta?
Yeah. I just want to remark as well that not only we are happy to collaborate, but we are very proud. And the other thing that I think it's important is how this process is actually involving all the communities around the plants and so on, because it's an amazing opportunities, of course, for these regions. And we actually want it to be a win-win for everybody. So it's actually a movement, as Clarissa was saying, and we are not in this alone. And this is in occasions like this, it's clear that we are not alone, that we are in a movement.
Thank you. So I'm now going to throw it back to Cesar.
Yeah, thank you, Joao. I want to thank Roberta, Clarissa, and Luis for sharing your views with our audience. It has been a very insightful dialogue. All BNamericas clients know that this is the kind of analysis we provide with our daily content. And if you're not a BNamericas client, please visit BNamericas.com and take a look at what we do. All our content is now in Portuguese, English, and Spanish. Thank you very much again. Have a nice day.
Thank you. You too.
Bye.
Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.